What is up, Nickel City Mafia? Welcome to a special series we have going about fantasy football leagues, the various types of leagues. We already have one not that long ago, so be sure to check it out. And Chris is going to tell you why you want to check it out. We had one on the redraft league, the standard one that most people get into. But this one, Chris, we're going to be talking about keeper leagues. And Chris, for those that skipped over that first video, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and how long you've been involved in fantasy football and why they should trust you.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'm Chris Caldwell. I'm on the Nickel City Mafia show. I do a weekly fantasy football show during the football season. We'll also do some shows before the season to get you prepped for your draft, players to absolutely draft, players not to draft. Me and my co-host Rick will get into all that. But yeah, been playing fantasy football for about 20 years. A huge stat nerd. Work at NASA with numbers. So definitely my passion, and I absolutely love sports, especially football. So fantasy football is a perfect fit for me. Mildly addicted. I spend probably at least an hour or two every day, if not looking into fantasy football, at least thinking about it. Right. So yeah, it's my passion. So yeah, I'm here to just tell you a little bit about keeper leagues. We did a previous show about redraft leagues, which means you redraft your entire roster every year. Keeper leagues, pretty similar to that, except there's a twist. I will say keeper leagues are for you that have been playing fantasy football a little while and you're like, I'm ready to do something a little bit bigger. I want to do something a little bit different. You can kind of start building that squad that's going to dominate year over year, and you get to keep a couple of your stud players every year to make that draft, that original draft that you do, that much worthwhile. Because if you really crush and get a couple good players, you can really be set for a couple years. So excited to tell you guys about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely need your help here, Chris, because I've been a basic redraft guy for all my life, actually. And most recently, I've been getting invited to these different types of leagues. And this is kind of what I reached out to you and said, Chris, I need some help. Let's do some shows to help other people. And so, yeah, let's get into this keeper league a little bit more. And I'll throw it to you because you are the king, and I'm going to be taking a lot of notes here.
All right, man. So yeah, the real difference between your typical fantasy football league or what we call redraft and keeper is that, it all starts the same, right? You get your 10, 12 players together, managers together, you do a draft. The first draft super important, more important than anything, because you're going to draft your first set of whatever it is, 16, 20 players, and then your first year is going to end, and then you're going to have the off season, and then before that second year starts up, based on the settings of your league, you're going to roll over a player that you drafted in the first year. And sometimes it's one player, sometimes it's two players, sometimes it's three players. It depends on your commissioner's setting of how many players roll over into the next year's roster. So say that you draft, let's see, last year you drafted Tony Pollard, the Cowboys running back, in the 13th round. Well, we all know Ezekiel Elliott's gone this year, and Tony Pollard's their starting running back. So for year two of my keeper league, I'm going to keep Tony Pollard. And because I drafted him in the 13th round last year, I am going to forego my 13th round pick in year two. So I have a great player on my team, and a player that's probably drafted in 2023 redraft leagues. You're probably talking about a second, third, fourth round pick. I got him for a 13th round pick. Great investment, right? So that's why that first draft is so important, and to kind of crush those later later drafted players, and then you can hang on to them for a couple years at a much discounted price or draft pick. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I have a little bit. So when you talk about this, these guys that I can keep, I have to do it before the draft starts, and then after the draft, can I drop one of these guys that I decided to keep? Does that make sense at all? What I mean, maybe I need to free up a roster spot, and this guy gets injured for the year, and I feel like he's probably done. I don't want him anymore. Can I get rid of him?
Yeah, you can absolutely, say you drafted the first year, you keep two players, they both blow their ACL, they're out for the year. You can choose to get rid of both of them, but then your keepers for your third year are then going to be based on your second year draft, right? So, um, yeah, then say you drafted another good running back in the 10th round of the second year draft, then you can keep him for your third year team. So it's all based on the previous year draft, unless you keep the same player year over year. So say you just absolutely crush it and you got Jalen Hurts 2 years ago in the 17th round, right? Just, oh yeah, I'll just throw this guy on my team. And you keep him 1 year, and then you keep him 2 years, and then you keep him 3 years. You keep that price that you originally drafted him at. Or you have the option the following year to keep players that you drafted and in that draft. Am I making sense here? It's kind of like you make an
Yeah,
investment. It's like buying a stock, right? You're buying it at a certain level. And if you choose to keep that stock, you get that original price that you bought it for.
gotcha. And then I guess the only other thing I have to ask, obviously, this is again built off that redraft. We talked about a lot of the topics in the redraft show that we did as far as the type of waivers that are done. You can all find that there. I highly recommend you start with that show first, and then everything here builds upon that, like Chris has said. And so, Chris, I mean, for me, makes sense what you're saying. How do I get the edge over the players? How do I get the edge over the other opponents I'm going up against in this type of league? Give me some advice, man.
Yeah, so for keeper leagues, I'm gonna sway more towards younger players with higher upsides, um, rather than the veteran players. You kind of know who they are. Their ascension to get better is you don't really see it there. Like for example, like a player like Adam Thielen or Juju Smith-Schuster, players, you kind of know who they are. They're decent. You'll play them on your team, but like there's no real path for them to have a much higher value the next year. You kind of want to steer away from those guys. What you're looking for is just drafting players that have that boom potential, because then you would have purchased them much below what they're worth, and then the following year they're worth a lot more. So then you're getting them at a discounted price. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what you're after. And I'll give my number one tip is, when you're choosing your keepers. So you just had your year one, it's over, and you need to keep three keepers to go into year two before the draft. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my roster that I have. I'm going to write down what draft, what round I drafted all of those players in the prior year, and I'm going to write it down next to their name. And then I'm also going to put this coming year, I'm going to draft next week. This coming year, what projected round is that player now supposed to go in? How have they ascended from last year to this year? The players that have the widest margin in where they were drafted last year to where they're going to be drafted this year, those are the players that are an option for you to keep because you're getting them at a discounted price. So that's really the key is the best case scenario, right, is you draft a player in fifth, sixth, seventh round in year one, and then year two, they're a first round pick.
Yeah,
That's
nice.
the dream scenario, right? Because you keep that player and you're having a first round talent on your team, but you only have to forfeit your 6th round pick that you made in that you're going to make in that coming draft. So that's kind of what you're after. Absolute best case scenario, you end up with three keepers that are all being drafted in first or second round, and then you give up, say, like a third, a seventh, and a 12th round pick. You're in the driver's seat, like you're ready to win, right?
Yeah, what's the best example of that you've had, right? What is it? Can you tell a story where this was you picked a 6th rounder and next year he was just a 1st rounder, a 2nd rounder? Anything come to mind for all the years that you've done this?
Let me think. I probably don't have a ton of huge success stories because usually if you get like a round or two profit, that's pretty good. An example this year, I mentioned it already, but Tony Pollard. You're looking for a change in scenery or a change in circumstance, right? So Tony Pollard last year, he was nothing more than ninth, 10th, 11th round pick. Now he's a starting running back on a really great offense. So uh, most teams that have Tony Pollard are going to keep him because he's such a value. Trying to think of other examples. Yeah, Jalen Hurts is another great example, a player that ascended very quickly. Oh, I have a good one. Isaiah Pacheco, running
Oh
back for the
yeah,
Chiefs.
yeah.
He was pretty much undrafted last year, and now he's starting running back for the Chiefs, probably going, I'm just spitballing here, fourth, fifth round in redraft in drafts. So you're giving up nothing for like a fourth round talent. So that's really what you're after. People that have gained 5, 6, 7 rounds of value from one year to the next.
That's awesome. I have two more questions and then we can close this one out, Chris. By the way, great advice. I want to ask you, so let's say you're in a league that's been established. They're about 3 years in. You've got, and how many guys are typically in this type of league?
Yeah,
10,
10 or
10,
12
10 or
managers. Yeah.
12. So let's say you have 12 managers. It's the third year of the league, and somebody's about to drop out. And so you're looking to fill that void. So you reach out to me, Mike, you want to join us? We're 3 years in. Am I screwed? Do I, like, because you guys, you might have Josh Allen. And I'm like, damn, I mean, I would want Josh Allen, but maybe I can work a trade out. But do I absorb that other guy that just left his keepers? Is that
Yeah,
how it works?
well, if they did it fairly, you wouldn't absorb his keepers, you would absorb his whole roster, and then you can make the decision on who you want your keepers to be. That way the team's a little bit more yours, has your own certain flavor to it. And it's, you're keeping players that you like for the value that you like, right?
Okay.
So that would be the fair thing to do there. Also, kind of what you see in leagues like this, because they are a commitment, a multi-year commitment, is you'll see if a player bows out and says, I don't really have time for this, or I don't want to do this anymore. Um, Typically the nice thing to do is to offer to pay, half of the buy-in for the upcoming year, something like
Mm.
that. This is kind of my team. I built it, these are the players I'm carrying over. So, I'll give you a free year or a discounted year. Thanks for taking it off my hands. So it's kind of the thing you see.
Awesome. And I just have to ask you, what is your favorite type of fantasy football league? Which is the one you enjoy the most?
So I'm a big dynasty football guy. So dynasty is like a keeper league, except you don't have a choice of who you keep because you keep everyone. It's like being a general manager, and you keep your whole roster. It's typically large rosters. You keep your best players, your Josh Allens, your Jonathan Taylors, and then you keep your worst players, your Cole Beasley, Devin Duvernay, those third string running backs that you hope break out. That's what makes it fun for me, because you're looking at the studs, but you're also looking at the next up and coming type players. So if you kind of put them on a scale, you have your redraft leagues, your keeper leagues, which are a little bit more in depth. They have some multi-year strategy. Then you have your dynasty leagues, which is you keep 20, 25 players every year. So let's
All
talk
right.
about those too, right?
Yeah, I can't wait to get into that one here. Um, so I guess that's kind of it on this one. Chris, any last thoughts for Keeper League? By the way, thank you. I now feel comfortable enough to get into a Keeper League. I have at least some knowledge. But final thoughts, closing it out about the Keeper League.
Yeah, I would just say, a lot of fantasy football and keeper league is just simply about math. Sometimes you just have to look at the numbers, look at your roster, look at, where the players are ranking last year versus this year, and just make a mathematical based decision. I'll give a real quick example of something you just wouldn't want to do. Let's just say, 3 years ago, you drafted Odell Beckham and he was a first round pick. Well, Odell Beckham's not a first round pick anymore, right? So, say you're the biggest fan, you have 7 of his jerseys, they're all on your wall. Keeping Odell Beckham on your team is not smart, right? Because if you want to keep him, you have to forfeit that first round pick. Odell Beckham, you can grab him in the 13th round this year, throw him back to the pool, and just hope to draft him again. It's okay. You might get your hands on him. So it's really a math thing. Another example, let me think of one. Last year, Devonte Adams, top 5 or 6 pick. He's getting older. He no longer has Aaron Rodgers as his QB. He changed teams, right? A lot of things change. He's not a first round pick this year anymore. Don't keep Devonte Adams and give up your first round pick. you can draft him in the second round. Just throw him back and draft him in the second round this year. So a lot of it is more, you kind of have to give up your love of certain players and play the math game. Look for where you're gaining this statistical advantages against the rest of your league mates.
Awesome. Yeah, Chris, you had mentioned some of the tools you use, and folks, for that information, go back to that redraft show. Chris shares some of the tools you should be using to know who you should draft, who you should pick up on the waiver wire, and all kinds of good information. And you can see Chris and Rick. Rick's not on the show tonight, but they do our fantasy football show on Nickel City Mafia. They take all your questions. We have a Discord channel, and they'll talk to you all week long if you're asking them questions. So lots of opportunity here to get an edge in your league. So, Chris, once again, thank you. I'm super knowledgeable now about a keeper league. I'm going to get into it, and we'll see you soon, man, on the next show. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Take care.